This week's lecture will discuss the selection of research themes for your senior seminar paper. To do this, we'll review the steps we've taken to get to this point, and then I'll discuss some of the issues you should consider when making your selection of themes. In a previous assignment, you discussed what your research will not do, and the purpose of this assignment was to make you more comfortable with the idea that your senior seminar paper, and any research paper for that matter, simply cannot include a discussion on all issues relating to a topic. And so the more specifically you can define what your research will not do, it allows for a more clearer picture of what your research will do. Now, on that assignment, this is something that you should not just submit and never think about again. In fact, a helpful way of developing a research paper is to continue to add to what your research is not going to do. You can begin to answer that question more specifically and in a more detailed way with the ongoing work that you do on your topic. So the more research that you do, the better you can answer the question of what your research will not do. But by making this discussion of what will be excluded from your paper, you then can get a better understanding of what will be included and why it will be included. This assignment, therefore, was meant to get you thinking about the composition of your senior seminar paper, specifically what themes will be included and why they will be included. Following the discussion of what your research won't do, you were then asked to explain what your research will do. And this begins mostly with an exploratory discussion of what you hope to accomplish with your senior seminar paper and how you are going to accomplish it. So in other words, you begin by thinking about general areas that you would like to learn more about in the assignment, what your research will do. And you are creating this discussion at a time when you're reviewing sources of information and conducting research. So this isn't thought of as a ironclad contract on what your research will do, but this is an important step in deciding upon the structure and the content of your senior seminar paper. And so we then would build upon this discussion and make it even more detailed and more specific as you conduct more research. More recently, you submitted an assignment that included a discussion of your bibliography. And the purpose of this assignment was to build off of the previous discussions you've had about what your research won't do and what your research will do. Specifically, I was interested in encouraging you to discuss your topic with a connection to the sources of information you have consulted with. So to take a step back from this annotated bibliography assignment, really what you're beginning to do is to discuss your topic with the support of research. And so moving from the earlier drafts of what your research won't do and what your research will do as sort of exploratory discussions and general goals of what you hope to do with your senior seminar paper, the discussion in the annotated bibliography is meant to encourage you to start thinking about how the sources of information that you've consulted with will help provide the foundations of the discussions found in your senior seminar paper. And so we've moved from, say, general plans and layouts from earlier assignments to having much more specific discussions that are closely connected to the sources of information that you've found and any other research that you've conducted. Your previous assignments have led up to this current one, which is the selection of research themes for your senior seminar paper. Now, when making this selection, it should be guided by the overall purpose of your senior seminar paper. And so you can ask yourself, well, what is the goal of my research here? Why am I reviewing these different sources? Why am I collecting this information? And why am I providing this analysis? In other words, what exactly are you doing? And so, in answering that question, that should provide guidance on what themes you are going to include. And furthermore, when you're thinking about the overall purpose of the senior seminar paper for this course, you've been asked to contribute something to discussions of Portsmouth from your academic major. And so think about what it is you feel that you can contribute from both your overall understanding of your academic major and from the research you are conducting and continue to conduct. What do you think you can really tell someone about Portsmouth? And so to get comfortable with that position of trying to contribute something to an understanding of Portsmouth and the surrounding area, you've worked on previous assignments saying, well, I know I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to contribute information from, say, either a natural sciences point of view or a social sciences point of view, and you could then get more specific and so forth. And by narrowing down the focus of your research, you're now putting yourself in a position to say, well, this is what I will specifically add to discussions of Portsmouth and specifically add to an understanding of Portsmouth. When making the selection of research themes for your senior seminar paper, I'd like you to think of me as an extremely annoying and critical reader of your final senior seminar paper. While reading your senior seminar papers, I'll be going through each line and asking, well, what allows you to say this? What could this really be based upon? And so for each statement you make in building your argument, I'm reading it and asking, well, how are you allowed to say that? What makes this a correct argument? And so I'll read it from the point of view of trying to criticize every single line that you write. And that's not meant to scare you away from writing your senior seminar paper. And actually, instead, I'm trying to now get you to think about the importance of defending your argument. So when you are selecting your research themes, there should be a reason behind it, or reasons behind the selection. And so in building this foundation of your research and of the argument that your research supports, you're now getting used to or getting some practice in defending why you're making certain assertions and how you're allowed to make those assertions. So you are able to be in a better position in your defense of your research paper, say of some annoying reader like this guy on the screen that you're looking at. You can defend that because you've already defended the basic foundations of your senior seminar paper. So one of the ways that you cut across or fight back against things like writer's anxiety and self-doubt and insecurities is by going through this process of defending why you're doing what you're doing in your senior seminar paper. So I say all this because you want to put a lot of thought into how you're going to structure the senior seminar paper. And that's true for any type of research or any type of study that gets done in either the natural or the social sciences. Whenever you make a contribution to the discussion of a topic, whenever you try to add an understanding of a topic, there will always be some that it says, well, how can you say that? Or they'll try to look through each part of your argument and question, well, I don't know how this relates to this topic, or can we say that this source is a useful source, and so on and so forth. And so one of the ways that you avoid, I guess, that writer's paralysis, where you don't know if you can write or what you should say and so forth, is to do exercises like we're doing in this course. You want to very methodically explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so keep that in mind. After you get through these earlier processes of building up the reasoning behind your argument, you can then move towards your final draft with a lot more confidence. You'll know that I'll be annoyingly reading each line and looking at ways of trying to criticize why you've written one thing or argued one point and not another and so forth. Well, you can have the confidence in knowing that you've thought out why you're making the argument that you are. And that's a very clear motive behind having you do this current assignment. When making the selection of research themes for your senior seminar paper, it's very important to think about the interrelationships that exist between the research themes that you're going to select. And when doing this, I would strongly encourage you to think about yourself as a director of an upcoming film. And you're now deciding upon the cast of actors that will be in that film. And so when making that decision about the cast, you're not only just looking at how one actor plays one role, and instead what you're looking at is how these actors relate to one another in different scenes. And so in doing that, you're looking at that interrelationship, how they feed off of one another, how they can complement different personalities, how maybe even there's conflicts or contrasts that you hope to include for whatever reason in a scene. This will obviously have a major influence on the overall quality of the film and the overall story that gets told. And so this is very similar to this part of your senior seminar paper. And so when looking at how these themes work with one another, this is going to decide the overall direction that your senior seminar paper is going to take. And so the ways in which they inform one another, and also the ways in which your themes have certain distinctions between each other, this will essentially decide the overall analysis of your senior seminar paper. And so in trying to decide what themes to include in your senior seminar paper, this is where you also get a more clear picture on what specifically you want your senior seminar paper to do. While working on your assignment for the selection of research themes, don't feel like whatever gets submitted is going to lock you into a specific path to the final draft of your senior seminar paper. And instead, this assignment is just one additional step towards the completion of your final draft. But that step is taken with the awareness that your path still hasn't been conclusively decided upon. So when you think about the research process, as you conduct research, as you find new sources of information and so on, it's very possible that you will make certain revisions in your argument, and that's perfectly fine. So I won't look at these assignments and say, well, okay, you now must talk about these certain themes in this certain way, otherwise you fail for the course or something crazy like that. Instead, this is now getting you to advance the discussions that will be found in your senior seminar paper by discussing the research themes that will be in your paper, and also in that discussion by providing citations that you've collected from doing your research. So when you're discussing the different research themes that you will include for your senior seminar paper, I want you to include citations within that discussion that refer to the sources that you've already reviewed. So we're now taking a step towards a more comprehensive and detailed discussion that will be found in the senior seminar paper by using your previous assignments and including the research that you've already conducted. And so here you'll have a very clear and documented discussion of what it is that these research themes are and how they relate to one another. So in making the argument within this assignment, be sure to include citations of the research that you reviewed. A common mistake found in senior seminar papers and in undergraduate papers in general is the inclusion of far too many research themes within a very short space to write about them. And so what this leads to is a discussion that's mostly just descriptive and contains very little analysis, just because it's just not possible to provide a detailed analysis of each research theme if there's something like 20 of them in a very short period of time. So you want your discussion to provide a detailed analysis of each theme, and you should not feel like you're just spending most of the paper describing these different themes and jumping to new ones every half a page or something along those lines. So this overall advice and guidance often would lead to the question of numbers. Well, what number are we really talking about? How many themes should each paper have? And I think you should aim for between 3 and 5 research themes to be included within your senior seminar paper. When you're looking at these themes that you want to include, you want to consider, will you be able to have enough space to provide a significant and meaningful analysis of each of these themes. This assignment and the previous ones will hopefully provide an insight into writing a research paper, in that the very last things you're doing is writing your introduction and conclusion. What you're doing right now is sorting out the general body of discussion in your research paper. And so there's no reason you should have an introduction or conclusion to worry about at this point. And in fact, as I said previously, the research process will likely get most of you to revise certain arguments or thoughts you had at the very beginning of doing this paper. And so it really makes it a rather foolish goal to try to write an introduction first or a conclusion first. These are some of the very final parts of your senior seminar paper to write. And so again, you're thinking about the ways in which your themes are going to connect with one another, and you want to think about the direction that's going to move you in. After you've decided upon that structure, and after you've conducted your analysis, well, then you can write your introduction and conclusion.